If you've been watching League Esports in 2025, you know that Fearless Draft has taken the scene by storm, going from surprise gimmick to global standard basically overnight and revolutionizing drafting in pro play.
We're going Pike!
But with MSI in the rearview mirror and the honeymoon phase wearing off, some fans and content creators have begun doubting whether the format is hurting the quality of professional games. Is Fearless Draft killing professional League of Legends? In this video, we're going to answer 3 questions. What is Fearless Draft? How well is it working? And is it really ruining Game 5s? Fearless Draft is a new way of drafting in pro play with the goal of increasing champion diversity, and it's actually really simple. Everything about Champ Select is the exact same as before. The catch is that once a champion has been picked by either team, it's gone for the rest of the series. All 10 champions picked in Game 1 are disabled for both teams moving forward, same with Game 2, and so on. By the time we reach Game 5, 40 champions are banned before the draft even begins, with 10 more standard bans on top of that, leading to some crazy Game 5 drafts like this, and this. The emergence of Fearless Draft has probably been the biggest surprise of 2025 so far, and with the year more than halfway over, we figured now would be a good time to take a look under the hood and see whether this new format is all it's cracked up to be.
Fearless was first introduced in the LDL in China back in 2022, but to spice up the first split of the year in the new 3-split system, Riot decided to add Fearless globally. Now, the potential benefits of Fearless are plain to see. Everyone loves to see new and interesting champions in pro play, and Fearless means that you're now guaranteed to see Faker on a different champion in every game of a series. Using this MSI Finals as an example, we got him on iconic Faker champions like Galio, Orianna, Azir, and Ahri, plus a Hwei game all in one series. It took him 156 games to play a game on each of those champions in 2024, but who's counting? By forcing players off power picks after just one game, not only does it mean you'll see the best players on more champions, but it also encourages and empowers wacky counter picks. In a traditional draft, you're taking a big risk by pulling out a weird counter pick. If it flops, the other team knows you have no answer to the pick and you've just wasted a game you probably could have spent playing a meta champion. But in Fearless, if your pocket pick works, you still look like a god, and if it doesn't, well, the other team can't abuse the power pick in the next game anyway because it's gone.
One of the most common complaints we see about LoL Esports is that despite having almost 200 champions in the game, only a small fraction of them are actually picked regularly in pro play at any given time. Nobody likes to see K'Sante vs Renekton, Corki vs Azir, or the abomination that is Zeri spammed by both teams in every single game. We've seen dozens of posts about how insert champion here is ruining the game over the years, because in traditional drafting, those picks are inescapable. A few picks may change game to game, but most teams just trade the same core combos that are the most OP. Fearless should negate that problem, while also making things more volatile, which could lead to more upsets and more games. It could also mean that the bounce team may no longer need to put champions in pro play jail as much if their baseline impact at the top level is lower. Because of this high upside, most fans were cautiously optimistic about Fearless, but there was still quite a bit of hesitancy to adopt a new format 15 years in. Going into 2025, the community held their breath to see how the new changes would land, and what happened next shocked everyone.
Fearless was an absolute smash hit. That much was clear long before we even got to First Stand. Fans, players, teams, analysts, content creators, everybody loved it. The format got about as close as you can get to universal acclaim, and if you've been around the League of Legends community for long enough, you'll know that almost never happens for anything. And Riot took notice, deciding to extend the Fearless Draft experiment for the rest of 2025, meaning that if things continue to go well, there's a chance it could become permanent. The move from Riot to embrace Fearless was unprecedented on many levels. League Esports is famous for being very change-averse with its formats. Remember, Worlds is still a single elimination tournament. So to go from 0 to 100 on such a big change to draft so quickly, they must be extremely confident that Fearless is the future. With that in mind, we wanted to run the numbers on how well Fearless is actually doing its job so far. And to do that, we're calling in an expert. Please welcome to the show, Foldy Sheet maker, Telestrator tool creator, and statistics tweeter, Leo, the LTA stats coordinator.
Hey guys, thanks for having me.
Now Leo, Fearless's most basic goal is to increase champion diversity, so how is it done in that department?
That's an easy question to answer since it's the whole point of the format. Out of the 171 champions in the game, MSI 2025 saw 109 unique champion picks, the most in MSI history and up by nearly 25% compared to last year's 88. The number of unique champions picked per series is also up, going from 16.3 in 2024 to 23.4 in 2025. But again, Fearless forces more picks by design. The thing I think is much more interesting is how these picks are distributed. These are the top 5 most played champions at MSI 2024, and these are the top 5 most played champions at MSI 2025. As you can see, K'Sante was played 51 times in 2024, but Rel, the most played champion in 2025, was played almost 3 times less often. Zooming out even further, this is a graph of the champion pick rates for MSI 2024, Worlds 2024, and MSI 2025. As you can see, the line for this year's MSI is significantly lower. Swapping this over to a graph of pick ban presence, the curve is less flat, but it's still a significant improvement. We still see strong champs very often, but now they're prevented from crowding out everything else. There's no doubt about it, guys. Fearless is working.
Thanks, Leo. We're also wondering about something else. Since Fearless increases the volatility of draws, does it also increase the volatility of series? It definitely feels like this is true, but are we seeing more Game 4s and Game 5s because of Fearless?
Believe it or not, things have actually stayed pretty much the same. In best of 3s, the average series length has gone from 2.41 games in 2024 to 2.32 games in 2025. In best of 5s, this has gone from 3.96 to 3.94. Pretty much the exact same.
So we know that Fearless is definitely working as intended, but it hasn't been all sunshine and rainbows. With MSI over, while it's by no means the community sentiment, we're actually starting to see criticism of Fearless pop up for the very first time. Despite being hailed by some as the best MSI of all time and having more Game 5s than any other MSI in history, a small but growing group of people online have been sounding the alarm bell about the quality of those Game 5s. Hell, even Ludwig chimed in. The argument is that because Fearless takes away so many picks, by the time you get to Game 5, players are often so far out of their comfort zone that they have no idea what to pick, leading to bad drafts and major stomps. More Game 5s are all well and good, they say, but it doesn't matter if none of the Game 5s are actually worth watching because one team always gets their teeth kicked in. People have been posting the lopsided score bars from MSI Game 5s saying this game could have been an email, and it's led to a growing question. Is Fearless Draft ruining Game 5s? It's an interesting theory, but there's just one problem with it. It's totally wrong. We've got 3 big reasons why pulling back on Fearless would be a big mistake. The first one is that Game 5s haven't gotten more lopsided, and we can prove it using something called close percentage.
Close percentage is a stat that goes second by second, tracking the percentage of a game where neither team has more than 51.5% of the total gold collected before 40 minutes. So if the teams have a combined 100,000 gold, any gold lead of 1,500 or less would be considered close, meaning the requirements are pretty strict. That definition isn't very helpful on its own, so let's take a look at a Game 5 that you probably remember pretty well, the epic final game of the 2022 World Finals between T1 and DRX. The yellow lines here represent the threshold of close percentage. If the gold graph is between the lines, then it's considered close. If it isn't, then it's not considered close. If you ever heard the term major lead or major deficit used on the live broadcast, this is how it's calculated. Since this game was super back and forth and only had a maximum gold lead of less than 4,000, it registered an insane close percentage of 93.3%, showcasing its status as one of the very best Game 5s of all time. This was an impossible run, and in one more impossible feat, DRX managed to win without having a major gold lead at any point in the game. They never crossed the yellow line. But let's go from magic to something more realistic and jump ahead 2 years to T1 vs BLG in the 2024 World Finals. This was also an amazing game, registering a lower but still solid close percentage of 58.4% on account of T1 jumping out to such a big early lead. BLG did reel them in eventually, but it took them about 15 minutes, keeping them just outside of the close boundary for a while before Faker started doing Faker things at 29 minutes.
By Bin as he looks for a little bit more. Oh, they go back in. Faker flashes in and down goes Knight. Once again, when you need someone, when you need anyone to stand up and show just what this game's all about, it's Faker. He finds another.
So while no stat is perfect, we think that close percent does a pretty good job of showing us how close the game was at a glance. This game is also a great example of why taking a screenshot of the scorebar at the end of the game and tossing it on Twitter is just kind of misleading. After all, a 7k gold lead at 32 minutes looks like a pretty big stomp if you tacked onto the email thread from earlier. But if you actually watch the game or glance at the gold graph, you know that BLG were actually on the verge of equalizing the gold just 3 minutes before the game ended, and that the reason the gold lead ballooned so fast is because T1 wiped tons of standing gold off the map after Faker went god mode in those 2 deciding fights. Seriously, this gold graph gets the closest I've seen to vertical after Faker kills Knight. So while T1 ended with a big gold lead, this was a pretty close game, until it wasn't.
But come on guys, you might be saying. That's just one game. There's no way you can convince me that all of these games from 2025 MSI were close. And you're right, I mean, just look at how lopsided these gold graphs are. There's no way we can possibly gaslight people into believing that these games were close and... Oh, hold on, wait a second. Yeah, those are actually Game 5s from 2024. Okay, but for real, these are the actual gold graphs from MSI 2025, and as you can see, many of these games were blowouts, none more so than Fly versus BLG Game 5. Oof. Yeah, we actually feel extra bad about this one because right before it, we published a video using the Doublelift Victor incident as a vehicle to talk about how history repeats itself in League of Legends, and then FlyQuest decided to lock in Lucian and R5 Zillion just like TSM did, and then the Lucian made a huge unforced error that lost them the game. Yeah, that one might have been our fault. Sorry, guys. But anyway, many of these Game 5s are blowouts, but many of them are more like the BLG T1 game. Close for a while until one team broke it open and didn't look back. If you average all of them, you get a close percentage of 45%. To put that into perspective, we decided to take a look at how close Game 5s have been historically, and what we found is a lot of Game 5s just aren't that close. This table shows the average close percentage of Game 5s in every international tournament since the stat was first tracked in 2015. Tournaments without any Game 5s have been left off the list. MSI 2017's 50-minute banger of a Game 5 between TSM and GAM tops the list with an absolutely absurd 99% close percentage. On the other side, MSI 2022's lone rendition of Silver Scrapes was pretty poor, like Mark Z tier. Now with a sample size of just one, both of these series are extreme outliers on either end, but taking a look at the majority of the list, you'll see that most Game 5s at international events aren't actually very close.
MSI 2025 falls into the lower middle of the pack, the 12th closest out of 18 tournaments. Not great, but nowhere near low enough to say that these Game 5s are worthless. It's also sandwiched right between Worlds 2021 and last year's MSI, 2 very well-liked tournaments and the only other tournaments on this list with more than 3 Game 5s. Not to mention that First Stand single Game 5 actually ranks 6th closest. And while it may not have been absolute cinema all the way through, it was definitely more interesting thanks to Casey's Nihilist center bot lane, something that we never would have gotten without Fearless. But hey, if the sample size is still too low for you, let's take a look at the average close percent of every Game 5 since 2015. Spoiler alert, it doesn't change much. When we think of Game 5s, we always jump to the great series, like DRX vs T1, SKT vs Rocks Tigers, and KT vs IG, because they're full of unforgettable moments. The kind of moments that made us all fans in the first place. But in reality, these games are the exception and not the rule. Most Game 5s are closer to, I don't know, SKT vs Samsung's Game 5 at World Finals. A lot of the time, one team will get figured out in draft, run out of gas, or just crumble under the pressure. That's sports.
SK Telecom have overcome every challenge. They are the undisputed best team in the world. The SKT reign continues. They win their 3rd World Championship.
So now we know that many Game 5s are a lot less close than people like to admit, but looking back at these email games, there are some really high gold differences at the end of the game. 13K, 16K, 19K. Maybe, even though we're not seeing Game 5 blowouts any more often compared to other years, when the blowouts happen, they're bigger and more concentrated. Taking a closer look at these gold graphs, there's this weird thing that keeps happening around 20 minutes where one team suddenly jumps out really far ahead and completely takes over the game. Is it possible that Riot has added something to the game that would drive snowballing out of control? That's right, time for reason number 2, Otacon. League's newest objective is the main reason why snowballing is out of control. Full disclosure, I really hate Otacon. In the past, teams used to have a lot of freedom in which objectives and which sides of the map they wanted to prioritize, but now it feels like both teams are just constantly pulled across the map and encouraged to fight for everything on nearly the same timers every single game. The worst thing about Otacon though is that you really are forced to fight for him every time because there's not really anything that you can trade him for. Giving up a dragon is fine, losing Herald or Grub sucks, but it isn't game breaking. Losing Baron or Elder is terrible, but at least the effect wears off quickly and it respawns to give you another chance to take it later. Hell, even if your team has to concede Dragon Soul, there's still a limited but real pathway back into the game if you can just stall out long enough to win a last-ditch fight at Elder. Giving up Baron, Dragon Soul, or Elder is usually very bad, but there are times when you can trade it for something else. You have a legitimate option to try to trade Baron for Soul, Baron for Elder, or even the famous Baron for Nexus, and come out on top on either side of it if your team plays smart enough. Otacon, on the other hand, only spawns once early into the game with nothing worthwhile to trade it for, and gives massive permanent buffs that are impossible to deal with. Perhaps instead of Fearless Draft, we should be focusing on the giant sack of golden XP sitting in bot lane that basically forces a game-defining fight at around 20 minutes every game, but hey, if you still don't believe us, let's run the numbers.
If Game 5s really are getting stompier, in theory you should see faster games and a higher gold difference at the end of games. Starting with game length, things look pretty much the same from last year to this year across all games, with Game 5 still averaging over 33 minutes. And despite all the viral tweets, gold difference at end is also pretty much the same. It's up slightly in Game 5s, but it's also slightly up in all games. Even if you isolate it to just Game 1s, which should negate the effects of Fearless, not only is it slightly up as well, but it's actually 1 gold higher than the Game 5 average. We think that Otacon is a big reason for the increase, but the gold difference alone won't prove that since gold doesn't showcase the true value of Otacon. At MSI 2025, the team that slayed Otacon averaged 32 Spirit Petals, compared to 13 Bloody Petals that the non-Otacon team got. If we convert the adaptive force these petals give into an approximate gold value, the team with Otacon had around 1650 more gold worth of stats. That's not even taking into account the XP it gives you or the AoE cleave you get on kills.
And that brings us to our third reason. Just give it time. Game 5 drafts are definitely worse than they were last year, but that makes sense because the Game 5 drafts just got a whole lot harder. We think if you give teams and players time to adjust, combined with a few small tweaks, this problem will solve itself. It's worth pointing out that the vast majority of critics of Fearless aren't suggesting that we remove it entirely. For example, nearly everyone agrees that Fearless is the perfect format for best of 3s. The problems only really come in games 4 and 5. What they're actually advocating for is that we shouldn't run Fearless for prestige events like MSI and Worlds. And I think when people say this, that Fearless is ruining Game 5s and it shouldn't become the standard, they're actually upset about something different. And I'm not just talking about Otacon. The core of the issue is that different draft formats test for different things. Traditional drafts are testing depth, while Fearless drafts are testing breadth. This is a bit of a generalization, but what I mean is that because traditional drafting allows you to try and build the best possible team comp out of the same set of champions every game, you're rewarded for getting as good as you possibly can on a few meta champions, since you don't really ever need to play anything else. Fearless, by contrast, rewards flexibility and creativity in draft, but it requires you to be able to play a lot more champions. But of course, there are only so many hours in a day to practice. You can't have every single champion mastered at any given time. So I think the real argument against Fearless is actually more of a purist argument. I don't care about variety, I just want to see the best players play the best champions at the highest level they possibly can, peak League of Legends. And I respect that. With more champs to practice, the absolute ceiling of Ruler Zeri might be lower in 2025 than it was in 2023, but the reality is, nobody wants to see Zeri in every game. Yes, players are undoubtedly less comfortable on their picks, but that's because Fearless is a different test. At the end of the day, sports are an entertainment product, and based on sentiment and viewership, fans find the breadth test more entertaining. I'd also argue that League of Legends is already a game that gets patched every 2 weeks, and that adaptation has become a core skill for all professional players, so why can't champion breadth also be tested?
In a world where League of Legends is nearly 16 years old and has 171 different champions, we think it's fair to expect pro players to be able to master more than 3 or 4 of them at a time. Players are more knowledgeable and better at the game today, and they have a much higher baseline on many champions from playing them when they were meta or in solo queue over the years than they would have previously. And if Fearless becomes permanent, we might see the rise of a new generation of players that are closer to Beryl or Lehens, mad scientist types that are always trying out crazy new picks on stage. There are still over 120 champions left to play at the start of a Fearless Game 5. That's more than enough to build a solid comp, but remember, this is still a new thing. Teams spent 15 years figuring out traditional drafts. 15 years ago, I was 10. That's a long time. By contrast, teams have had just 6 months to work on this new test. Give them time. They'll get better.
That's not to say there aren't things that can be done to improve Fearless. One idea we've seen that we love is giving coaches a time bank that they can use at will to give them time to respond to an unexpected pick. But overall, this Moko down is the best change to the competitive scene of all time. And it feels like by expecting absolute perfection right away, critics of Fearless are missing the forest for the trees. Every time we post a video, we get a ton of comments from people who used to watch League Esports but don't anymore for some reason. If you are one of those people, genuinely give it a chance. I think you'll be surprised.
Thanks so much for watching. I'm sure you've noticed that this video is a little bit late, and that's because we've got a massive collaboration coming up next month, which caused this video to be delayed pretty badly. While we can't announce what the collaboration is just yet, it may or may not involve the creator of Fearless Draft himself, so stay tuned, and if you want to support our channel, hit subscribe or head over to our Patreon. They're coming for us. This episode is sponsored by the Feds.